Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Jouar, and today is Thursday, April 18th, 2024. And I've got Petter Neby and Steve Cistulli here. Petter is with Punkt, and Steve is with Apostrophe. We've had Steve on the show before, talking about this incredibly cool OS that puts privacy and security first. And Petter, you made the phone. You created the vessel to make Apostrophe fly. And you guys have made some pretty cool phones over the years. So I'm really glad to be talking to you. And I'm kind of curious to get started. If you can walk us a little bit through what Punkt is all about, because we've had Steve to talk about Apostrophe. And I'm curious as to how you guys got involved and maybe some of the history behind the company for those listening who don't know anything about Punkt.
Right, yeah. So Punkt, we were established in 2008. Together with Jasper Morrison, our art director and designer. And we've been practically doing what we call taming technology ever since that time. So, of course, until this MC02, that we're going to talk more about later, we've been doing one hammer, one technology kind of thing. So a phone that makes phone calls and might send messages as well. So this kind of very focused products. So our second feature phone, which we launched in 2019, that was all very nice. We were in this world where we introduced feature phones back into the market and gave that option. But that's a very hardcore lifestyle, living only with a feature phone. And so, of course,
you do make it easy, though, Petter. I mean, let's briefly talk about that. I think that you're not just making a feature phone; you're making the feature phone. Let's get real, right?
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. It truly warms my heart because when I still see this is the same product that we've been doing since 19. This is the third generation, and when people say, well, when is your MPO3? And I say, I don't know really what else we should be doing with this because it's so timeless. I'm sure, if you have this in 20 years, next to you, you will not tell really whether it was made the year before or 20 years before.
Are you the Porsche 911 of feature phones?
I like to think of that. I like to think of...
it doesn't change too much generation. You just keep refining the process.
It's all about that. And of course, technology evolves and components, a lot about making hardware. And that is a world where we have seriously very little say in how it evolves. So there are limits to what we can do and not do. But yes, I think, it's of course important when you want to kind of give an alternative into a marketplace that is so busy with a lot of noise. You need to come in there with, a lot of confidence and with something that, it's not kind of screaming at you. It just sits there and has been very thoughtfully made within that context. So, yeah, I hope so. So 911 MP02 in 20 years will possibly be. You will follow the line, and you will not be surprised to see
it's the first product I thought of that has this kind of iconic foreverness to it. And I think that it's a little different now because, obviously frequency bands evolve. It's hard to use a 2G phone today. I did for a while. I used to resuscitate my old phones from the vault to show people that didn't know about what it was like. But unfortunately, that's the only challenge you have right now. But
but of course, this is a 4G phone.
Absolutely. It's going to last for quite a while.
Yeah.
So tell us, how did this partnership come to be? You're making these feature phones. They're the 911 of the feature phone. Everybody knows about this now. How do you get to breaking into making, a smartphone?
Right. So in comes Steve from the side here.
Hi, Steve.
In 19, of course, we built the whole UI, the whole software already was, not as solid as we wanted it to be. We did not have the whole infrastructure for updates at that time. So thankfully, I met this guy sitting here called Steve, and we started to talk about, what you can actually do within this relatively less complex world of feature phones and take full ownership of that. That's where we really started. But of course, during the phase, and when we launched the apostrophe, because this guy is since now 1.5 years is running apostrophe version 1.
Ah,
So
that
the
is
whole
something I wasn't aware
ecosystem
of.
sitting there and pointing and delivering and making sure that it's the securest phone off the shelf that you can actually get your hands on. And so it's sitting there on top of what is called apostrophe.
Yeah.
And of course, as we started, we saw that, guys, we need to do something serious, because feature phones is a niche, a very, very small niche in comparison to the most important product ever made for humankind, the smartphone. And that's where the journey really started.
So, how did you go from, making these in-house, feature phone designs that are so unique to actually like moving into, what seems like just a very generic phone to me? I mean, it is beautifully crafted, but it's not standing out like some of the more jewel like smartphones flagships we have today. And I have a feeling this was intentional. So maybe you can talk to that. And of course, Steve, I'd love to hear from you as well how you came into this partnership and how you felt you could kind of solve this problem of making the Punkt smartphone if there was ever going to be a Punkt smartphone.
Right. So yes, the design of the MC02, the smartphone, is intentionally very, very tamed and very minimalist. There's nothing there. There are no candies there to hang and dingle in front of you. And again, however, I would say it's just a glass slab,
Yeah.
and it didn't try to do anything more. And in 10 years' time, it will sit there. It will be as modern as then, except, of course, for the components, whatever they come up with within the next 10 years. The MC02 is all about what is inside of the MC02. And that's the only way Punkt could ever go, and wanting to provide a smartphone to the world was based upon something like apostrophe, and that Steve and his team built. So here we go. Steve comes in.
Steve enters the stage. Steve, what brought this partnership on? And I mean, obviously, with apostrophe, you wanted to take it to the next level and you needed a partner for that. You already had Punkt as a partner. So it made sense to continue that collaboration. Tell us a little more about how you guys ended up defining what this product would be for the end user, because it's half of it is the hardware and half of it is the software, and then there's another half. It's like it's like the Three Musketeers that were four people. You kind of have that cloud, that service, which I think is what really, really defines the product here, in my opinion, right?
Okay, so let me go back. I feel like I'm being caught here, Miriam, because we never spoke about the MPO2 and the ability to have the apostrophe software on the MPO2 firstly. And what is interesting is that every MPO2 that is out there today actually has the capability to interface back into the apostrophe services. And so it's quite unique because those applications were also custom built and can be exclusively downloaded on the MPO2 feature phone, and you still have access to all of your apostrophe services. Now, we never talked about that, and I'm sure that
We
you're going to
didn't.
talk. No, I'm going to get talked to about that, I feel, from you a bit later.
That brings up a question, actually, real quick. Is MP02 built around an Android kernel, or is it a completely much more lightweight OS running this feature phone? And of course, I have questions to Petter about what in the hardware has been changed from whatever ODM or design there is here with the MC02 to meet the apostrophe needs that are very unique.
So the MPO2 is actually based on a forked AOSP kernel as well,
Okay,
and
wow.
then it's been extraordinarily hardened. It's important to know that the MPO2 was one of the first BlackBerry verified feature phones as well. And so
Wow, okay.
that product has been evolved significantly. It's extraordinarily underrated, in my opinion, especially knowing now that the MPO2 can actually interface with your apostrophe services. Having said that, it was in this very room in Switzerland where Petter and I were talking about the Punkt ethos of tech intentionality and people doing these digital detox. And, there was no way that Punkt was ever going to really extend itself into the smartphone space unless we found a realistic way that met the intention of Punkt, but at the same time solved the extraordinarily difficult technical problem of replacing all of the services that were out there. And at the end of the day, we really took the concept of digital detox and said, what if we were to call it digital discipline? Okay. So now we could understand that there is a gap between digital detox, which is very easy to understand. It's stop. And then digital discipline, which is stop, but much more slowly and by being educated. And so that's how things built from this very room in what you see today with the release of the apostrophe operating system, as well as its ecosystem as part of the MCO2.
I will link to the podcast that I did with you, Steve, so that the audience can go back and listen to our conversation, because I think I learned a lot and it's really fascinating. But back to the hardware and, a little bit more to the system is what I'd like to say here with the MC02. Petter, what did you have to, assuming you started with a more generic design, it's not easy to make a smartphone, but overall, there is recipes out there nowadays. Shenzhen can provide you with a smartphone if you want one, right? I know that's not what happened here. You guys had to make some changes. You're bringing in a level of security and expertise here that is not something we normally associate with those kind of phones. So walk us through what in the hardware might have changed, if you can talk about it, because obviously this is sensitive. But my audience is very tech savvy. We look at these phones, we understand kind of where they come from. We're familiar with Dimensity 900. We're familiar with the spec sheet. I love the little details here, like wireless charging, nice touch. You don't see that too often on this kind of device. And so, what I'm wondering about is if you can tell us, what did you have to spec? What was different here?
You didn't like the 3.5?
Oh, you mean the headphone jack?
Yeah.
No, of course I like the headphone jack, but
always missed that. So
no,
it was good to find that.
I liked it and I saw it, but to be honest with you, with the specs that you're delivering, it's pretty common to still have 3.5s, even on phones that are sold by the companies who don't take care of all the security and privacy detail.
Yeah.
But I think it's a privacy feature, right? Obviously.
Absolutely.
Right? Like wireless exposes yourself to hacking because Bluetooth is
one of the worst.
Exactly. It's generally not the best reference.
Just sit in your lounge at whatever place.
But the reason I brought up wireless charging is because for this kind of overall design and spec sheet, wireless charging is generally not there. You generally see the headphone jack, right? So other than the headphone jack and wireless charging,
it's a
cool
good,
touch.
Generous battery was very important.
Yeah, 5,500 milliamp hour is really impressive. And also you can, relatively fast charge, 18 watt on both wired and wireless. You have equivalency there, which also is, I think, pretty rare.
Yeah, it's good. And then what was really important is to not overspec it. Again, because when you use that, Miriam, you see that you don't need a overspec phone to run this beauty because of the software itself. So let's go back to your analogy of 911 earlier. Why do you need to put a V12 onto a 911? You don't need that, right? You don't need that.
That's
you need
overkill.
It maybe on your Ford Bronco or whatever. But here, and this is kind of thing, you see the receptiveness, how it responds on how you're, using this phone, and anything more would have been an overkill. Then, of course, you could always want to have more storage or whatever. It's good. 2 SIMs was important. So it was really, as you know,
storage. You have storage, which is really becoming very rare. Also, you have an extra button. Tell me about this, because I just got the phone a few days ago, and I haven't quite figured. I mean, it's not the only phone I've had that has an extra, I assume, programmable button. But what's the intent with this programmable button here on this phone?
Yeah, it's there to deliver one of those things that you decide to have there active, and it's really important to you. So that is kind of the personality of you sitting onto that hardware, and that's really a programmable button. It came with the whole list, and as you know, going to Shenzhen, we are not talking millions of volumes here, so your selection and your possibility to go in and configure it differently is relatively narrow, but still we had some possibilities. The internationalness of the hardware is very important too. It really works anywhere on the planet. So all the bands, all the certifications, all of that is there.
Right.
And that is very, very, what was
really
that's
important. Very costly too. 5G, just everybody know, obviously it's 5G. So, that's actually a very interesting point you make, that, you get all these certifications, which is a lot. Like, I have talked to a whole bunch of even big companies, that sell in much larger volume than you do. And everybody's always like, I bring up certification and you can see their face just drops. And they're like, yeah, let's talk about that.
Let's take really impressive. One area at a time. So that's really, really, that's fantastic. And, being in Barcelona late February, where you also were, and talking to any corner of the world and being there, offering that, it's very important. Then last but most importantly is to also find a partner that gives you access all the way down to the chipset and all the software stack that sits and drives the whole hardware. And because that's fundamental for this side of things, to make sure that Apostrophe can take full control of the whole hardware environment.
It's like Tesla. You need complete vertical control of every bit of firmware, of every radio, of every module, so you understand exactly what's going on, so you know that it's secure and private. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. And, when I saw the price of the phone, which is, pretty expensive considering the spec sheet, I had to think really hard, because I have enough experience with this, and think to myself, where did the cost go? Obviously, developing the OS and the partnership with Apostrophe. But I also think, people don't see that. These certifications, the fact that you were able to spec the exact parts you needed, the low voluminous of the product, all this add up to make a phone that delivers ultimately what you were set out to do. And it might not be spec-wise, as you said, a V12, right? But it is a solid set of specs that, are fully vertically owned and controlled by Punkt and Apostrophe.
Exactly. And if not, it would be, Apostrophe would never be willing to deliver the Apostrophe on the hardware, and hence we would not be able to deliver the hardware out to the audience.
And you clearly did have this partnership before the MP02. So, right. So at this point, it's like you already had created a feature phone that was secure and had these picked and chosen parts. So you already kind of knew what to do there. So that makes perfect sense to me. What would you tell the audience that we haven't talked about yet, that really still stands out, that you feel is one of those things that should have them explore the MC02?
Most important is to own your own data. And, wake up in the morning, go into your smartphone. If you really need to do that, the first thing you do, go into that place, and everything there is only your data. Nothing is shared with anybody. If you really want to go out there and go and pick up the newspaper, go and get it, but make sure that it sits there on the MC02, because that application will not triangulate, because everything is sandboxed. So I think, Apostrophe really managed to create this perfect world where, you really start from default being 100% private, and then you dip into these spaces.
That's right.
There's no business of Apostrophe nor for Punkt to stop you from doing other things. We just make sure that it's one or two stripes further than normally. And when you dip in, it will not be able to triangulate. It just sits there, hardened into that silo, if you want to, or sandbox. and you deliver or share the data according to how much of feed you want from that application. I think that's very important.
And I think that's exactly what makes you so unique as a combination right now. So I think my audience will learn a lot from this. Pointing them to Steve's apostrophe talk has been helpful, but also getting your side of it, Peter, with the whole, like the intentionality of this hardware, I think is what I think people don't appreciate. And I'm glad I was able to discuss that with you today. Thank you so much, both.
Thanks, Miriam.
Thank you so much for having us. Thank you.
And we're back, folks, with Max Weinbach. Hi, Max. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm pretty great. It's good to see you. I mean, we see each other pretty regularly, but I haven't had you on the podcast in a while, so I'm kind of happy to have you back.
It's been a few years.
Yeah, now you write for Creative Strategies as an analyst. You do all kinds of cool stuff. I'm very excited about this because, I want to talk about the kind of elephant in the room, which I'm sure you have a lot of opinions about because you cover AI extensively for Creative Strategies, and that's the AI pin, the reviews. I'd love to get into it with you around what you think this reaction to the reviews has been, because there's a lot going on with there. And then in general, like what these gadgets bring to the table, what your thoughts are on, Rabbit and all that stuff that's coming up, and where it fits into the whole AI infrastructure and picture in general. So any initial thoughts on those reviews? You don't have one. I don't have one. We can only meta review this right now. That's all we can do.
I'm working to try to get mine as soon as possible. They've had some actual delays in delivering. Basically, the carrying case to charge it comes from a different factory than the pin, and that's behind, so they don't have enough carrying cases, like charging cases, to ship with the pins. So there's back and forth waiting on inventory. They said all the pre-orders should ship hopefully by May 3rd, but all the priority orders, sorry, so anything until the 21st should ship before May 3rd.
Okay.
About a month delay. Kind of unfortunate.
Yeah. So, it seems to be the story, right? They had very limited review units, fair, and obviously struggling to send some people their review units. I don't think I'm important enough for them to even be on their radar, but it's a bit unfortunate because, here are some hand-picked reviewers that they sent this to initially because of, I've worked for a startup, worked with Pebble. I get it. I had review units to send out. I didn't have enough. I had to pick and choose. It's all good. But at the same time, here we are now, and these reviews are pretty, pretty damning. And I feel bad in some ways because I've been there on that product side, but I also don't feel bad because I'm like, reviewers do their job and the product wasn't ready. Do you think they were pressured by the investors? Because there was so much hype, right? That's the other thing that really rubbed me the wrong way from day one. And I'm in Silicon Valley all the time. Like I kind of get the culture, but I was so put off by the AI pin and the whole messaging and the whole marketing around it.
I think they were trying to go for a classic media approach. I mean, they're all ex-Apple people, right? So big YouTubers, classic media like, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Bloomberg, I think Mark Gurman got one, and then go from there. But it just didn't work because a normal reviewer is expecting like a finished product. We're not, the majority of the time, not getting first generation products out of a new startup in a new category with an unseen, unheard of, like barely understood technology that is AI, LLMs, multimodal AIs. And that just makes it incredibly difficult for anyone to actually know what they're reviewing, how to look at it, and when the issues arise, why they're happening in the first place, and if this is something that can be fixed or not.
Yeah, I feel like they did not, as a consultant, I do mock reviews for companies. I've worked for, some of the bigger brands out there, names, and they've given me devices before launch and said, hey, what do you think The Verge is going to write about this, right? And I think that this is part of the core business, I think, of being a startup in a new product category. You need to hire people that are going to give you that reality check because you've had your blinders on this whole time developing the product and you're not sure, you feel good about it because you've put all this effort and energy into it. And you've kind of lose sight of like, what are the basic core things that really need to work? Like to me, the fact that they shipped without timers, like, look, I am an ex-software engineer and I certainly have no visibility on AI pins code, but it seems trivial to add timers in this day and age to anything. Why didn't you put that in? Why didn't you put that a little bit of time and effort into that, test it, ship it? Like, there are so many weird things here. And that's why I'm like, they should have dog fed it internally more, maybe externally, as I suggested with some consultants. But at the same time, I'm like, why did you even bother to ship this when you clearly didn't have enough devices and you were missing features like a timer? I don't know. It just seems weird to me.
I think a lot of it is, I mean, they tried to have it ship and launch with the Eclipse, right? They
You're
more or
right.
less
Well,
did
they
that.
failed at that already. So
They were a few days off. The delivery started April 11th. That was more or less right. But the thing that they were really like going for, I think, is they wanted to ship with the Eclipse, and they assumed 6 months from November, more or less, would be enough time for them. The hardware was finished; they needed to start production on it, and then that gave them 6 months to finish up the software. And I think as they went more into it, I mean, the thing effectively works as a router. An AI router takes one input query and then decides where to send that, whether that's to an LLM to answer a question, multimodal LLM, title for the AI pin, whatnot. And that's the core underlying technology of Cosmos and what makes the AI pin interesting and actually valuable for most people.
Absolutely. I think the underlying stuff is
too much.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the underlying stuff is solid. It just seems to me like, I think they were just a little too gung-ho to stick with their deadlines that they set, and that, they should have just said, like, no, let's just wait another month or two, polish this out, get it out there.
I disagree. I think it was a good idea they're doing it, because look, now it was good for them, even if the marketing was horrible because of the bad reviews. A lot of people placed orders after that. If you went to Twitter, you could see the entire AI community being like, look, This is a great product. We're going to buy it, even though we had no intent on doing it previously, because we're seeing what it's doing. It's finding its niche market of people really into AI, what AI can do now, and it's getting away from that mass consumer. Because even with truly horrendous reviews of it, they're still interested. I'm still interested in it. Even though I know it's going to overheat, it's going to have bad battery life, all of that stuff you expect from a piece of tech, it's not going to do well. But its core technology, the vision I see where it's going to go into the future, that is still something that they were able to get perfectly done.
I agree 100%. I think the Cosmos, or whatever you want to call it, is the most valuable thing they have. But I do agree with you to some extent that any attention is good attention. But I also feel like most of the techies I've talked to, not just us media, but generally people who are tech savvy early adopters, have been put off by the reviews. And I don't usually see that. You're a special case, because I think as an analyst, you're gonna want to get your hands on it, because you understand the long-term ramification of this technology.
I pre-ordered it day one, as soon as it came out.
Right. And I didn't, because I just felt it was too expensive. Right from the get-go, I didn't like the marketing. I felt it was too expensive. But I did get a Rabbit R1. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what they bring to the table. But overall, I think there is a lot to be said in a positive way about the idea of a piece of hardware that is what these devices are doing, including that pendant, whatever it's called. There's another one, right?
Rewind, the Limitless pendant.
Limitless, yeah. So where do you think we're going with this, though? Like, say, AI Pin fixes some of this stuff, they have enough investors, they kind of, correct course, they come out of this, and version 2 or version revised, it's all software anyway, a lot of it. The hardware, I think we should talk about their choice of chip and stuff. It seems to me like they started developing this a long time ago and stuck with what they had, and it's pretty much obsolete now. Like, Snapdragon 720G is a 4G chip. What, it's 6 nanometers, 8 nanometers? No,
8 nanometer.
It's 8, right? And it's like not very power efficient. I don't know. It's weird. It's weird to me that they didn't go to Qualcomm and said, hey, can you help us? Can we do this better now that you have better chips or something?
Even go for like some Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 and just underclock it.
Yeah, so what's your thought on that? Like, you're clearly agreeing with me here. Like, why? To me, this is what I'm talking about. It's like there seems to be a general misstep in the whole company's thinking. No, it's not just like, I think that you're right. The core technology is solid. The router, I think that what they're trying to do is valid in the sense that I think we're going to see somebody succeed at doing this. And I think it's potentially a product category that will definitely grow. But like, how can you have all these missteps, especially when you have the kind of investment they have? Couldn't you just say, hey, let's take a break and redo this or fix this or whatever, right?
I think you kind of have to like think of Humane as two different things. Cosmos and
Right.
their router, their underlying tech, which by the way, they did say they're opening to license to other devices,
Nice.
other people. They announced that at MWC with SK Telecom. They're open
Oh, wow.
with SoftBank, great investor for it. But they said they're open to doing all this tech and licensing. And then you have the hardware itself, which is terrible. I think they said they started that in 2018, the development of it. And Imran posted a few images of it from a giant just piece of plastic.
Yeah, I saw that.
3D
It's
printed.
really cool. Yeah.
But when you're starting that early, I mean, you have to basically choose your hardware. I think realistically, it's Qualcomm. They could have just pulled the chip out, put a new one in, rebuilt
That's what I'm thinking.
kernel.
Yeah.
It's there. But my other thought was maybe the licensing was too much from Qualcomm, which is always a complaint from a lot of OEMs, especially startups. Or maybe just the chip cost would have been too much into their R&D budget, their margins, and they just wanted an old chip with a lot of inventory that they could just get freely and easily from Qualcomm and not have to worry about it. There's definitely some pricing stuff in there. It's a $700 product. Probably shouldn't have to worry about that. But they're a startup. They still need to worry about a lot of this.
No, and I get that, having worked for a startup myself. And that's also why I'm like, why not start with something less ambitious? Why not make the pin $300 as an accessory to your phone and wean people into it? If you do it right, they're going to use the pin more often than their phone. Eventually, they're going to want a pin.
That.
Because, look, Apple Watch didn't come out with 4G. It eventually got 4G. And I think universally you can agree, right, that an Apple Watch today with connectivity is a better product than Humane AI Pin and does more.
It depends on what way you're thinking about it. If you want the AI, the thing that can answer the questions for you, in the future when agents are a thing, actually complete actions for you, you can't do that on an Apple Watch. Sure, someone could build an app for it, but that doesn't exist now, and who knows?
But future Apple Watches will do that.
Maybe.
Apple Watches come out every year. They'll gain AI functionality.
Yeah, but this is more of a developer question than anything. Because I think you could build an app now on the same basis as Open Interpreter 01, where you can just control your Mac from your Apple Watch using your own API keys on your own hardware with your own everything. The thing is, that doesn't exist yet.
I ordered that, by the way. I think it's very interesting.
So did I.
I think this is actually one of the... To me, I'm the most excited right now about that one of all of them. But it's not really the same.
For that.
It's not the same.
Rabbit and 01 are the same.
Yes, I agree. To me, the reason I'm excited about Rabbit is, like, I don't know. Look, it's hard to explain this to you, and I think you get it, but I'm not sure if I'm trying to translate this for my audience. You and I think, have been doing this enough now that we kind of get a knack for things. Like when Humane, right from the get-go, my knack was, ooh, that's a lot of hubris and a lot of, you're a little bit, a little over the top here. The messaging is a little off. It's way too arrogant. Like, slow it down. Rabbit, I was like, I'm amused. This is entertaining. I'll go with it. Like, I immediately had a different vibe, a different take on this, on the direction they were taking. And then as they were revealing more and more, I'm like, I can see all the flaws in Rabbit, like in the sense of it's such a simpler product, right? But at the same time, it seems much more accessible. I'm not talking about price. I'm talking about people, I think, can wrap their heads around what that's going to do for them much more than the iPad.
What you just tell it to do things. If you want to train it, you go to Discord and show it how to do something, and it just learns and does it. It completes actions on your behalf in a super easy way. I'm not sure about the privacy aspect of it. If you actually look how that functions,
that is one of the big unknowns here, and they could still fall flat on their face once we get review units and we find out.
So they actually did. They did on their Discord. If you go through, they have demos of everything. Jesse, their founder, was showing basically it runs on a VM at a data center somewhere with all of your accounts on there, and when it needs to do something for you, it has this large action model in the data center. Go complete the action on the Windows computer. It's a Windows computer in that data center, and then send it back. So it's basically just streaming 24/7 data from the data center to your Rabbit R1.
Could as long go as that's very wrong.
Yes. So the thing Jesse showed was the actual Windows VM being controlled by his R1. So he would ask a question, and then in the background, you saw the VM going to Spotify and playing music.
So they need access to all your accounts. That is
you sign in, and then it
scary
saves
to
the
me.
authentication token for it.
Well, remember all the brouhaha around iMessage and that? With all the companies that tried?
Yeah.
Remember how bad it went for nothing when they partnered with, what was it called?
I think a little bit of the difference is this isn't hijacking any service. It's just on a data center going to the website or whatever for you.
But the security aspects are still there, right? It's still in a data center somewhere. Somebody's got your Gmail account.
If you sign into Gmail.
Well,
it's your choice to sign into it. If you just want Spotify, DoorDash is one of the examples they use. You can just do what you want.
I think
it's
if you want
very easy to
know,
choose.
I agree. But if you wanted to know your calendar, your contacts, I mean, Gmail for me will be the one because that's all my life.
I think
right?
with that, they're doing a partnership where it's using the same type of link as any email app, where you just go through, select what you want to give it access to, and hit allow. But for more complex things like Uber, on the other hand, you sign in, it saves your authentication token, and then it goes from there.
So it's really interesting because I thought what they were doing. I mean, I haven't been on their Discord like you are. I've been kind of deep in the trenches with their stuff. My approach has been more like I'm gonna buy it and wait and see what happens, and when I get it, I will be delighted or not. I'm much more like I'm trying to be very, I can be nerdy and go down in the trenches and look at code and whatever, but I'm feeling like this. I want to experience it as a consumer would. So I'm kind of trying to stay as ignorant as I can about it. I thought the whole thing was actually running Android on the device, and the
I
apps.
have no clue.
The apps were controlled, like you had the apps installed on the device.
So in their original research paper, that's what they showed. They showed it was an Android phone with the LAM controlling
it's Uber on the thing, and you say to the AI, blah, 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 and it goes to the cloud, and it figures out what that means, and then it sends it back to the phone, and the phone clicks and taps on the things in the Uber app that you don't see on the screen, and it does
there's an Android VM. I think there's a VM running Android doing it. Like, it's all data center. Because if you actually went back, the company used to be called like Quantum something. So their entire thing has been AI is cheaper than you think. And I wouldn't necessarily disagree if you could have one LAM controlling, let's say, 100 VMs, because, it doesn't need to be a one-to-one. You just do it in batch inferencing. It's fine. It shouldn't be that expensive. Data like slight VMs, just running a web browser, you could probably run 100 of them for $1 to a day. One action model, maybe like 25.
But they're not charging us anything.
Realistically, I know. I think they can build that into the price of the product.
Interesting.
Because if it's 200, I can't imagine the actual hardware costs anywhere.
Oh yeah, no. This is think budget of budgets.
Like $25 bill of material.
Smartphone. This is like a basic smartphone, right?
Yeah.
It's got nice skin on it, right?
It's got a 1,000 milliamp hour battery, a 720p display, 8 megapixel camera. It's cheapest, like literally cost them probably $10 to manufacture.
So you think that their business model is going to actually work? They're not going to turn around and say, "Oh, now we need to charge you for data center access."
Jesse, their CEO, did you go to their CES launch?
I did not. I did not get invited. It was somehow it was a conflict or something. Like I remember getting the invite the last second. I was like, "Oh crap, I can't make it to this. It sounds really interesting."
I sprinted over, got lost on the way, but I caught a few important tidbits from him. They are going to try their hardest to never monetize, and they are never going to sell the underlying LAM technology. But the one thing that always got me is they're going to try their hardest to never monetize. Unless the company's going to go bankrupt, unless they do a subscription, they're not going to. It's like a make or break type of thing.
Well,
if they need to, they will, but they're not going to do it.
I love that they're committed to that. That's great. I mean, that's what I heard, but I'm just worried because there's been so many baits and switches over the years.
I think Jesse, if you've looked at his Twitter, he's a very authentic guy. Just kind of cares about it.
I think that's the vibe. That's what I'm saying. Like how you get a knack when a product is announced, and I got a really good knack and a good vibe from what I saw of Rabbit R1, and so I spent my own money on it, and I'm looking forward to it. And then it was Humane. I just couldn't justify paying for it, and it was pretentious. Yeah, very. And I couldn't justify, paying for it. So I just said, if they send me a unit, great. If they don't, whatever. Yeah, it's pretentious, but in this very tone deaf kind of way. Like even for Silicon Valley, as I said, I'm used to a lot of, hubris and brouhaha and like, kind of like we're better than thou kind of approach. But I just felt they were so like completely unaware of the world out there. Like, I totally think it's fair to say, hey, wouldn't it be great if we can get a device that weans you off your phone completely and is standalone, has its own data plan? I get all that. But I'm like, maybe start a little smaller, maybe start where you can prove all the bits and pieces and then put it all together as everything just evolves and gets better. Because that was a lot. That was a lot. And it was a lot also in the way they presented it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I think a lot of it comes down to, I think they had an idea, get away from the phone. What can we do to make it so you look at your phone less? And then they just kind of failed at it because it doesn't do a lot of what people use their phones for. You don't use your phone to ask questions most of the time. It's to complete something. It's to do an action. It's to go to Instagram and see that message someone just sent you, or look for directions somewhere, something along those lines. Usually to get from point A to point B and to do something in the middle ground. Like, maybe Google searches and asking questions is like an eighth or 10th of what you'll do on a daily basis. But why go for 10% of what you do and just ignore the other 90%? That doesn't get you off your phone. It just adds a secondary input for what you're barely using your phone for in the first place.
And then the whole thing of like, it's a separate number, so now you have to manage that, and people
they're working on linking those, I think.
No, I know they are, but this is a base core product issue here. Like, this is something they should have, like timers, like basic stuff, right? Like, I think that I wasn't expecting this thing to be able to call me an Uber on day one. Like, to be honest, that's fine. But I was expecting like at least the core functionality of, like integrating seamlessly with my like calendaring. They should have had that from day one. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, I agree. They should have had a lot more of this. I think it's just timelines versus whatever. Hey, they'll have it by the summer. Better late than never. And I think that's honestly for the best.
Let's see how it develops. And as you said, I think Cosmos, as it develops and gets maybe adopted by others, I think it's a viable product for them. They probably have a lot of expertise in that area right now, probably because they're one of the few doing that. And I think they're
the first products I know of that's like multimodal, doing like different function calls for different things and different model. Like, they're the first ones I've seen on any software or hardware product doing that.
Right.
I don't know anyone that's using ChatGPT 3.5, which I'm more or less certain they're using to answer questions, along with Gemini, along with GPT-4 and Claude. Like, they're the only ones I know doing all of this.
And that's really, really fascinating. I think this is definitely where we're going future-wise, right? Like, we need to kind of be able to use the best of the best.
AIs are commodities, though. Yeah. It's everyone today. Meta announced Llama 3. It's now better than Claude 3 Sonnet, which is the middle tier Anthropic model, and a 70 billion parameter model you can download onto your Mac today. I downloaded it right before we started recording.
Nice.
So like, this is stuff is just, it's coming. And then there's 8 billion you can install on your iPhone and use just using private LLM in 2 seconds. It's great.
No, I think it's exciting, and I just don't want. This is what I'm worried about is, and when people see all of this failure on this first product, that they write off the whole AI thing. There's already, a lot of negative sentiment towards AI because people are people, and tech is scary right now for a lot of people. Like, people are scared of EVs. Like, please, come on, like, hello. Proven technology by now. But the point is, like, it's like, I think there's a general negativity around technology, and Silicon Valley has created that to some extent with, a lot of the social media problem stuff. And then you throw AI in there, and then people like start talking about things like losing their jobs and whatever, all those social and cultural consequences that may or may not be real. But the point is, people, there's a lot. So I don't want AI Pin to be one more thing that people point at to say, because you and I believe that AI is a valid tool and we use it and we think it's going to be the future to some extent for some things we do. And I don't want people to be like completely put off by it. And that's why I'm hoping Rabbit nails it to some extent. I'm hoping that, we have a rockstar product out there that's like, oh, I can afford this. This is cool. This is fun. This is easy. And, sure, your average person is not going to get a Rabbit R1, but maybe version 2, or maybe, it'll be another company that comes along and does another product, right? So I'm kind of gung-ho about it. I think it's a cool idea. Like, a lot of people say, like, voice is not a great way to interact with computers, and I agree. But at the same time, for some things, it's fantastic, right?
Yeah. That's why you need natural language understanding, which is where the AI, that's all AI is basically. It's natural language understanding. And then once you can understand what you say and what it should do, it can do things, preemptive. I think Xiaomi's been posting that with Hypermind and their products, where it'll learn how you act and then start doing things for you depending on where you are. But that's just not really, it's there. It's just so expensive and so slow at this point. It's not conceivable.
I mean, I like the idea of, there's an agent sitting on your computer at home that you can control, not a virtual machine in the sky, that you talk to with your phone or your watch or your pin, and does stuff for you. Like when I tell Theo to book a flight for me, they do the best job at booking a flight. And I don't want to replace Theo, because Theo is awesome, but Theo has better and other things to do. And, why wouldn't I have an AI assistant book that best flight for me, knowing all my information, all my status things, all my logins, blah, blah, blah. That's an achievable task today, right? I think it's an achievable task to push on a pin on your chest or tap a button on your smartwatch without your phone in range and say, call me an Uber.
Yeah, it is.
Right?
I mean, there's no reason.
This is not impossible.
I think it gets more interesting when you look. Michal posted yesterday, AI Pin apparently runs a very, very, very custom version of Android.
Interesting.
So, no reason it couldn't nowish. You would need the UI to make it work, but it could.
It could, yeah. As an aside, because I want to probably switch to the other topic soon, one last thing. I want your gut feeling on this. I think we're probably going to be aligned on this, but like, what do you think this weird reaction has been in some circles on social media against the reviewers doing their job as reviewers? Like, what is up with that? Like, we get a product, we try it, and we tell you how good or bad it is. This is our jobs. We're not going to I'm not going to look at a startup and say, oh, they're a startup and there's potential. Like, I understand that, but like, we can't review things on what they're going to be like in a year. We have to review them on what they're like now, right?
Yeah. I think generally agree, reviewers should just say what the product is, good, bad, ugly, whatever it is, just say it. And if it's bad, it's bad. If it's good, it's good, whatever. For Humane, I think they were in a weird situation where it was reviewers didn't understand the technology, what it's leading up to, how it should function, how it will function, and they couldn't see the vision of it. And that's what led them to bad reviews. And then you have people on Twitter that actually see it, they understand it. You see where the AI future is going, what Humane was going for. And it's just this disconnect of they're crapping on a product we really like and we think is the future. They should be a little bit nicer about it. It's a startup. It's the beginning of the next era of computing. I hate to say it, but it's more or less true. Maybe be a little bit more lenient on it. And there's there's the disconnect between people that are into the tech and where it will be in the future, and reviewers who are reviewing the here and now.
I think that's totally valid. I just also think we live in a different landscape than when the iPhone launched, which, okay, look, I'm the first one to have been there before the iPhone covering smartphones. So I know the iPhone did not invent the smartphone, but the iPhone definitely changed the landscape. It was the, product of its time. And I think we're in a different world now. I think that back then there was a lot of optimism around technology, Max. I know you were younger, you don't remember this, but holy crap, anything was possible. Silicon Valley back then was freaking amazing, man. Like, people were doing the coolest stuff and nobody was getting upset about anything. It was amazing. And then here we are 15 years later or whatever it is. And we're like, people are just much more like, we have been sold your potion and your potion made me blind and I'm not going to do that again. So F you, right? Like I'm joking, but I think there's a lot of, not just amongst the general population, right, instead about technology and AI. I'm talking about, there's a lot of us who are like, look, we don't want to do this maybe this is going to work out thing. We have to just be honest with you, because there's a lot of stuff out there that's just crap, right? And so I think,
yeah. I had a teacher in high school that had a good theory on a lot of this stuff. He said up until the early 2000s, every major technological advancement had about a 20-year adoption period. You start with the early adopters and it goes up, and it takes about 20 years to become ubiquitous in society. And then since the iPhone and since technology and since the internet, that adoption curve went to 15 years, then 5, then 2, and then it's like 6 months. So there was no time to get used to the new technology because something else is always there. And that when you start looking at when all of that happened, depression, anxiety, all of this stuff became a lot more common because there was no adapting to it. It was just thrown in your face, and it was too much stimuli and overload of everything. And I think we've just hit that point where it's a new thing every day, every week, and the majority of people aren't able to adapt to it. And if you're not able to adapt to it, you're just going to say, no, bad, I don't want this.
Yeah, it's too much change to suddenly 100% I get it. That's a very good theory, actually. But I think, ultimately, if you look at reviewers back in the iPhone days, I panned the iPhone for many things. I also praised it for many things. And I don't have an AI pin, so I cannot really judge 100%. But knowing the people who have reviewed it, like Michael Fisher, Mr. Mobile, like Marquez, I know them well enough and I trust them well enough that I think they did, and they talked about some of the positives too. I think that they did a fair job with these reviews. And even the iPhone, it had no video recording, no copy and paste, no 3G. Like, there was so many things that my Nokia phone, as crappy as it was in terms of user experience, did way better than the iPhone. But I could see the light. But I cannot see, other than, as you said, the routing and the way we're going forward with AI, I cannot see the light with this. Like, it's not.
Let me ask you this. Let's say they have a better camera and the projector can project onto more than your hand. So if you walk up to like your walls, like your doors, you're getting inside, it'll show you the temperature inside your house on your door frame, and it'll show you all of the information. It's starting to get proactive about it. If you want, when you start doing that and start extending the capabilities, which would be possible theoretically for a lot of this stuff. Bethany even said there's no technical limitation to why it has to be just your hand. Like, when you start expanding into where it can actually interact as a sort of AR device, do you think there's something there?
Yeah, I think there is, but I don't think we have the tech to do that. When the projector now barely works in daylight, and it gets hot running the projector for 2 or 3 minutes,
5 to 6.
Yeah, okay. Well, you know what I'm saying, right? Okay, 5 to 6. I just I'm on, as I said, I'm on board on principle, and I think the AI stuff can work. I think the voice assistant stuff can work to some extent. It has its use cases. I just feel like we're not quite there at the state where we can create a device that small, that has the battery life. And it doesn't mean we shouldn't do it, but I think that, there where the iPhone was 2 years before the iPhone was actually released by Apple, if you know what I'm saying. And they just came out with it too early. Like, I think it needs not just the software and the experience and the feature set, but the actual hardware needs.
Yeah, I'm not sold on their hardware being the future. I think the software is.
No, I agree. But I think what you're describing requires new hardware, right? It requires a projector that's bright enough. There's no reason
when I was speaking to Bethany at MWC, she said a lot of it comes down to like laser. They have a laser physicist on staff. But a lot of it also comes down to what they can legally ship in different countries. Lasers are regulated in the US. You have to be very careful about what you're doing. So they can't really do any type of high-end projector. Not necessarily because the tech doesn't exist, but because legally they can't do it in a product that small, pointed down for like human use.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Cool. Well, listen, let's transition to some other topics kind of related to this AI stuff, because robots are definitely benefiting from AI for all their sensing and stuff. The Atlas robot from Boston Dynamics, the new one, that was really cool, actually, I thought, in terms of marketing, PR. They said, we're discontinuing the Atlas robot one day, and then the next day, here's our new Atlas robot. Duh, of course. And but anyway, I just want to mention, for those of you who haven't seen it, Boston Dynamics has kind of closed the chapter with the old bipedal robot that they had called Atlas, and they've come out with a new bipedal, which is now powered by electricity, not by a generator mounted on the back of the thing, and is much sleeker. But more importantly, I think that's where we're all kind of going like, ooh, uncanny valley, is that it's very interesting in the way it's jointed. It can do some crazy, weird
Fully
maneuvering.
360 hinges on every joint. It's just
Pretty
creepy.
much. And for those of you on Patreon right now, I was kind of doing a weird yoga dance. But yeah, it's very, very cool. Like I'm a little creeped out, but not enough to be like, oh no. I'm more like, interesting. I can see how this could be useful. Anyway, look, I'm a big fan of what's going on in robotics lately. I think this is fascinating to me. And yes, there is a part of me that's kind of worried about the Terminator scenario here. But at the same time, you know what? I've always treated my robots well. Hopefully they'll treat me well too.
I agree. It's just a cool piece of tech.
Really
That's
cool.
where we're getting with most of this.
It's super cool. So check it out. I'll put a link in the show notes. I'll also put a link in the show notes of all that kind of aggregates all the AI pin reviews and stuff. And stay tuned. Next week, we should have our rabbits for the next show. So, Rabbit R1. Nothing Ear and Ear A were launched, I think yesterday, today, whenever it was. This is, by the time you get this podcast on Sunday, it's in a few days, so we're fine. Have you gotten them? I love them. They're fantastic.
I sent in a request for a unit a couple of weeks ago, was told we'll get back to you, so I'm waiting on that.
They are, okay, so here's a quick gist of it. So Ear 1 was the first, then they did Ear Stick, then they did Ear 2. Ear 2 was basically the much better, much more polished, much more final version of Ear 1 in the sense of like...
I hated Ear 1. They were so bad.
There are some issues with Ear 1, but Ear 2 are incredibly awesome. And then Ear Stick were, affordable, no noise canceling. It's not what I would recommend. But here's what's going on with Ear and Ear A. Ear is essentially Ear 3. It is essentially an even better version of Ear 2. And by better, I mean sound quality hasn't changed very much. It was already pretty good with Ear 2. But it's better noise canceling, better battery life, and more importantly, they've got LDAC support now in addition to LHDC, which is good for those of you who are not on a OnePlus or a nothing phone, one that supports LDHC or whatever that codec's called. So if you're like on a Pixel or a Samsung, you'll get really better audio quality than AAC, which is what is currently available on Ear 2. Then the other thing that is cool is that they have Ear A. And Ear A is almost identical. Instead of $149, it's $99. And the big difference is the color options. There's a yellow color, which looks fantastic. You've seen Playdate, the little pocket play computer with the crank, right? It's that kind of yellow, and it would go really well with Playdate, actually. And the case is slightly different shape, but it has no wireless charging. That's the big difference. Also supports LDAC, also supports the better noise canceling. Basically, they're very, very, very similar. Different price points, and you lose the wireless charging.
I think they said there was a difference with the ceramic driver too. It doesn't use the ceramic
I don't hear a
difference.
Classic. I do not hear a difference in sound quality. They're very good, both of them. At this point, my gut feeling after using them for a few days is for the color alone and the fact that they sound almost identical and one is cheaper, I'd get the cheaper one, even though you guys all know that I love my wireless charging. I very rarely charge my earbuds with wireless charging, so I could forego the wireless charging. But honestly, kudos to Nothing. These are fantastic. They're really, do yourself a favor, Max. If you had a bad experience with Ear 1, get these because it's going to change.
I loved Ear 2. It's just Ear 1 were
terrible.
You
had Ear 2. Okay, yeah. So then if you've had Ear 2, you know how good they are. Imagine better than Ear 2, but also now with a more affordable choice with funky color. That's
my problem with Ear 2 was actually never the quality. My issue is any earbuds that aren't AirPods, after about an hour, my ears start to just hurt.
They bleed.
I don't know.
Uncontrollably?
No, not hurt. Yeah, definitely. No, it starts to become a little painful after a little bit. And that happened with Ear 2.
Interesting.
So unless they really change the shape, I'm not necessarily sold on
that. Is definitely everybody. Fit is I always keep saying this because I review a lot of earbuds. Fit is the number one priority. Because if it doesn't fit you properly, you're not going to be happy. Yeah. So, you've tried all the different ear tips, right, to make sure that you get a match. Because what I found is
Galaxy Buds do that for me too, and so do Pixel Buds after a while. So it's just
interesting.
just weird shapes.
Yeah, for me, they are very good. Like, I'm also very happy with the latest OnePlus Buds 3. They're really great for the money. Anyway, so there you go. Nothing's done that. They also announced ChatGPT is coming to the Nothing Phone 2. That was today. So that's exciting. All right, let's see what else we got here. Also, as a public service announcement, I know that you haven't written tech reviews in a while. Mostly it's been car stuff lately. So I have a review out there of Nothing Phone 2A on Hot Hardware. I put the link in show notes. Go check it out. Great phone for the money.
I
You
got
played
mine
with it, right,
Monday.
Max?
I got it Monday.
Awesome. Do you like it so far?
It is a really good $299 phone in the US.
Yeah, exactly.
Or
It's
$349, whatever. It's a really good cheap phone.
It's the best budget phone for the US that I've ever used. I mean, if I start comparing it to some of the Chinese phones, it's a little different.
Yeah.
But speaking of foreign phones that we will be getting eventually in some way or another, I made that comment last week on the show that the Moto Edge 50 series, we already had the Pro out, but we didn't have the Ultra or the other one, which I think is called Fusion or something. Yeah. So they're now official. These are global models, which are going to become, some of them are going to become Moto Edge Plus and Moto Edge for us in the US. So whether we get both or one, I don't know. But the Ultra is really, really hot. And particularly because
the wooden
it comes
texture feels so nice.
Nordic wood. You felt it? You touched it?
Yep.
Oh, where was that? They had a briefing
Can't
for
say,
you
but
guys?
I can't say, but I've used it. I've touched it. I've felt it. I've had some. They're really nice feeling. It's not. It
I
feels
love it.
just. I don't know how to describe it. It's not perfect wood, but it's very close. You can knock it and it sounds like wood. It's just the best material I felt for a phone.
And you know what? I've always been a big fan of wood material on phones. Like the Moto X had it, and the bamboo back on the OnePlus One. I'm really excited about this. Also, I really love what Moto's been doing with what's it called? Vegan leather, vinyl, whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
They're not the only ones. The Chinese have been doing it for a while. Oppo
I
has
would
been doing
argue
it for
theirs
a while.
is the worst, though.
Yeah, it is. It is. But also the colors.
Xiaomi.
Oh yeah. I've got it's Xiaomi and Oppo do it better than Moto for sure. But it's nice to have that. And Peach Fuzz is a really, really great pink color, by the way, in person.
Yeah, it is.
And that's another option you have. So look, I'm excited about these phones, mostly because they might be coming to us. And I think that that Ultra with the wood back option and the specs on it are really solid. Snapdragon 8S Gen 3, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the camera system looks like it's actually
very good,
pretty solid. So I was very impressed with the Moto Edge Plus last year. It's kind of like flew under the radar for a lot of people, and the non-Plus version as well later on in the year that got launched right around the time as OnePlus Open and Pixels, and everybody was too busy to review it because it was a mid-ranger. Nobody cared. Those two phones last year were really good. And the Edge Plus last year was potentially the first Moto phone. Max, you correct me if you think I'm wrong, but the first Moto phone with a camera that was competitive. So
yes, competitive in its price range. It was like 700, 800.
That's what I'm saying. But it was surprising because I was expecting potatoes, and I was like, oh, this isn't so bad at all. This is actually not bad. This is getting there. So if this thing comes as the Moto Edge Plus in the US with a wooden back, and that's really nice camera system, and the camera is at least as good as, some of the basic competition.
It will be as good as, let's say, a OnePlus 11, OnePlus 12.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. OnePlus 12 is actually really solid. It's a very similar camera system to the OnePlus Open. I think it's finally the first OnePlus where I can be like, yeah, you can play with the Galaxies and the Pixels and the iPhones of the world, and I'm not concerned, But I expect this to be close to that, and so I hope we get it, and I'm excited about it simply because, well, Nordic wood. I mean, how can you go wrong with wood?
It's great. Yeah.
Perfect. Next up on the list is a couple of kind of rumor-ish things. They're Pixel rumors. So supposedly we're not going to get a Pixel Fold 2. We're going to get a Pixel 9 Pro Fold. You have a lot of inside info on things. You think this is accurate?
Yes, I also think it is an absurdly atrocious name, and
It's terrible.
Google's hardware division is.
It's
I mean,
terrible.
did you see today? They merged it. Rick is now in charge of hardware and Android.
I did not see that today.
They
Well,
merged
there you
the
go.
Android. They merged the Android and the hardware teams at Google. Rick is in charge of both now.
Wow. Okay, interesting. Bad name, you're right. Terrible name. Why? Why did you do that? Why did you do that to yourself?
I think what they're doing is it's similar specs across the board. If you've followed the leaks, there's going to be 4 Pixel phones: Pixel 9, Pixel 9 Pro, Pixel 9 Pro XL, Pixel 9 Pro Fold.
I didn't know there was an XL in there. What's the difference for Pro 9 and 9 Pro XL? I mean, size, but like, what are we talking about here? Is the XL the same as the 8 Pro
6.1 versus 6. It's like the difference between like
okay,
6.1 inches and 6.
So basically, they're taking the
iPhone Pro to Pro Max.
Right. So they're taking like the Pixel 8 today and making an same size Pro model, and then the 8 Pro today is the XL, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same specs between the two of them. It's just different sizes.
Interesting. Well, that's a lot of pixels. And then, of course, we get a 9A eventually. But first, we have to get the 8A out of the way. And I'm looking at Google I/O for that very soon.
Probably.
Do you think we're going to get the folding phone on I/O then? We're not.
No, it's not.
Yeah. We're going to get it in the
It's going to use
fall.
the same chip as the Pixel 9.
Damn. I hope the next generation Tensor is better, because that's my biggest gripe right now. How do you feel about that, Max?
Tensor's bad. It's really bad. But I think they're slowly getting into more custom parts of the chip. So hopefully as they start getting away from Samsung doing most of it, because Exynos is historically atrocious, and get more into like custom in-house Google, because their TPUs are good. They have silicon prowess. It's just, it's not being shown on Pixel at all because Samsung.
And I also want better radios. It's getting better, I have to say. I don't have a big lump of metal heating up in my pocket randomly like I used to with my 6 Pro. But my 8 Pro is better, but it's still not good enough. Like, it's still, my battery life
It's not as good as the Qualcomm, yeah.
My battery life is not competitive. Like, I just, it's very frustrating.
Yeah. Apparently in internal testing for a few carriers globally, they had the 8 Pro being on par with last generation Samsung, so the S23. It was the same year. It's about the competition. It was about on par with that, but this year's is just so much better that it's going back to a Pixel is difficult at.
Like, bad naming aside, there's also rumors of the Pixel 9 series getting satellite connectivity, so that seems pretty likely, right?
Yeah, probably. I mean, it depends what type of satellite connectivity. Are we talking T-Mobile and SpaceX
SOS,
where it connects normally? Or
I don't think I think they're just talking about emergency use, right? Like the iPhone has, right? Yeah, so I don't think it's, I mean, T-Mobile is still doing their thing, and you won't need a special phone. You'll actually be able to use an older phone because it's just
and SpaceX
5G,
launched 10 of the first satellites for
awesome.
for Starlink a couple weeks ago.
So good. Like, this is how you do it. Why reinvent the wheel? Like, I don't get it. I mean, you know, if you have to go to a constellation that's different than Starlink, you're kind of screwed anyway, because they're all geostationary and they're all crappy and out there.
Verizon and AT&T partnered with 2 others to do the same exact thing.
But they're not LEO, are they? They're not low Earth orbit, are they?
I think they are.
Oh, okay. Maybe because that's the only way.
I don't remember the companies, but I know they're doing it. All 3 major U.S. carriers have partnered with people to do it. I'm just not sure.
Like,
same tech, just.
Oh, I didn't realize it was the same tech. I always thought the other ones partnered just for SOS, you know, like low bandwidth, low latency.
No, they're doing full data and calls, text, everything.
Interesting. Well, we'll see how it goes. Stay tuned for Pixel 9 news. But yeah, that name, man, they really gotta get
atrocious.
That's just terrible. Okay, Vivo has the X100 Pro MediaTek Dimensity 9300. I don't have one, but everybody who's used it has said to me, especially on the camera front, that it's an incredibly good phone. The OS, Fun Touch is Fun Touch, and it's terrible. If you get Origin or whatever, the Chinese version, it's better. But the reality is it's the cameras. And so now there's rumors of a Vivo X100 Ultra, which means Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 and even better cameras, a 200 megapixel periscope. Wow. So what? I mean, let's see what happens. It's probably coming out soon.
Yeah, it is. A lot of these are starting. Vivo's doing controlled leaks, getting it out there.
What's your take? Have you used the X100 Pro at all?
I briefly used it at MWC at the MediaTek booth for about 5 minutes.
Okay, yeah, you're in the same boat as me then. You didn't get a review in it. That's really hard to get. Like, I asked Vivo multiple times. They're like, can we send you a V30 Pro instead? And I was like, sure. And actually, the V30 Pro...
I just ignore my emails.
I received the V30 Pro and reviewed it a little bit on the show last week. Very, very solid mid-ranger. But the X100, I kind of want to get my hands on this Ultra when it comes out. Let's see. It might just be China only, like the the rest of them.
It will be.
Who knows? Yeah, for sure. All right. What else is there? Oh, yeah. So last week we talked about the Realme P1 series. I don't want to say too much other than they're official now, and it's pretty much what you expect. It's very, very, very mid-range. But the P supposedly stands for performance, so I'm not quite sure where their performance is coming from here. MediaTek Dimensity 7050 is not a high-performance chip. So I think this is more for markets like India and stuff, where they just want a maybe slightly more gamer-centric version. The other one is Snapdragon 6 Gen 1. So that's for the Pro, and then the non-Pro has the Dimensity. Nothing too exciting, but they're out there. Yeah, the prices are very, very affordable, like 20,000 and 15,000 Indian rupees. That's, I don't know, I have to translate that, but that's pretty cheap.
It's like 150.
Yeah. So
170 for 15.
Yeah. So, we're never going to see any of these. But hey, look, they have Sony Lydia sensors with OIS. That's not bad at that price point. Yeah, interesting. Anyway, they're out. We talked about them last week, kind of wondered why do they have to add another entire category of phone. Realme has too many phones. That's basically how I see it right now. Have you played with any recent Realmes? I've got the...
I've never played with a Realme.
Oh my God, they're so good. So the thing about them, Max, is that essentially they're OnePlus Oppo phones, right? Like,
yeah,
just kind of like a sub-brand that's
it's more
a BBK
budget brand, yeah.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Their latest flagship, the Realme GT5 Pro, is basically a OnePlus 12.
Perfect.
With wireless charging, metal chassis, glass, vegan leather options. It's got the crazy periscope, 3x 64 whatever megapixels. It's a really nice phone. The only thing they scaled down from the 12, making it significantly more affordable, and it's China only, is the ultra wide is 8 megapixel, and it's not a nice 50 or whatever. It's got the 4500 nits display. It's got everything else. I don't know. It's Snapdragon 8 Gen 3. It's actually the first Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 phone I got. I got it in December because it was one of the first. But yeah, Realme does some cool stuff. That's why I always keep an eye out for them. All right. Let's see what else we got here. Oh, okay, this one. Okay, the only reason I put this in there, you're going to say, why? Techno Camon 30 Premier. So I've had a few Techno imaging phones. The Camon series is their imaging series, and they would be surprisingly good at taking photos. So that's why I'm paying attention. But more importantly, they showed this phone at MWC. Were you there? Did you check it out?
No.
It's really nice. The cameras are really impressive on this thing in terms of specs.
There's one thing. They have a Sony imaging chip. It's the first one I saw. It's a dedicated ISP for Sony. First one on the market that I know of anywhere.
Exactly. And that's why I'm like, okay, I got to mention this because, I know that my audience is not just like, some of you are in India, some of you are in Australia and stuff, some of you are in parts of the world where you can probably buy this phone because this is, Techno and Infinix are very popular in developing countries, Africa, stuff like that. And now you can get these really nice, I've had the previous Camon phone from them and I was kind of impressed with the camera. I was like, wow, this thing is incredible for whatever, $350 or whatever it was. So, and you look at the specs, this thing is pretty damn solid. Dimensity 8200, that's not bad. So anyway, It's out there now. It does look pretty nice too. And more importantly, I'm kind of almost, and it's got a periscope telephoto. I'm kind of almost tempted to ask them for review units just so I can see what that imaging chip does. Because,
same.
So there you go. I brought that up mostly because I think I pushed 1 or 2 photos on social of me playing with it at the MWC last year. Not last year, 2 months ago, whenever it was. And that's basically where we're at with the news and all that stuff. So yeah, thanks Max for being my guest again. I really enjoyed talking AI with you, and I'm really looking forward to next week in Rabbit R1. It's gonna be great.
Yeah, same. Are you going to the party for it?
No, because it's in New York, and I'm not going to be anywhere near that. And it's not like they could afford flying us out and stuff like. So they're actually sending it to me. I should have it the day after or something, because you know they're prioritizing the people who are going to review it. So that's why you guys are picking it up right there and then. So yeah. It'll be fun. Tell people where they can find you on the internet, Max, where you post on social, where you are. Tell us about your stuff at Creative Strategies, all that.
So if you're interested in any reports, analysis, that type of like in-depth, more enterprise-focused, hopefully a little more consumer at some point, you can go to creativestrategies.com, have that. Just full-fledged analyst firm at that point, basically. And on Twitter, you can find me at just Max Weinbach. It's spelled a little bit differently, but if you type in my name, search has it. If you type in Max, I'm usually one of the first 4 or 5 to come up to.
Yes, you are.
I don't do any YouTube. Instagram's not really used. TikTok's not really used. Just those 2.
Awesome. Well, you can find Max there, and you should definitely follow Max. Max is awesome. I really love your take on things, and I think you landing at Creative Strategies is an incredibly good fit. This is a great team. I know them well, and I've worked with them. They're wonderful people. So, folks, you know where to find me on the internet. I'm at Tankgirl, TNKGRL, on all the social, pretty much. That's like the comic book character Tankgirl. Just drop the vowels, and you get my handle on Insta. You get my handle on Threads, on Twitter, and on Blue Sky. And then, you know, if you want to subscribe to the podcast, I'd love you to do that. It's mobiletechpodcast.com. We're on all the major podcasting platforms. And so go find us there, subscribe. I'm every week with a media guest. And every now and then I have these special guests like Punkt this week that will talk about their products in a kind of more in-depth way. It's kind of interesting. And then, if your app lets you review or rate the show, please consider doing that. There's a YouTube channel as well, youtube.com/mobiletechpodcast. I publish about once a month, generally an unboxing or some sort of basically eye candy that you can check out. And so you know how YouTube works. Like, subscribe, tell your friends, click the bell, comment, tell me in the comments what you think of the products. What would you like to hear on the podcast? All that. You can basically talk about the podcast on the comments as well. It's fine. Finally, if you want to support me financially, there's a Patreon, patreon.com/Tankgirl. That's patreon.com/TNKGRL. There is a video version of this podcast you can get. You can get it before the audio version. The audio version comes out on Sundays. Generally, a day or 2 before that, you get the video version, and there's extra content, sometimes bloopers. Sometimes we show products, and you can see them, and basically you get to see our faces, and it feels a little more personal. I just changed the pricing. It's pretty affordable, $5 a month. Consider helping me out if you can. I'd appreciate it. And then if you don't want to use Patreon, that's cool. There's a PayPal link in the show notes. You can click in there and donate whatever you want. Buy me a coffee or something. And I'd appreciate your support. And I want to thank Petter at Punkt and Steve at Apostrophe for being my guests this week. Punkt was established in 2008 in Switzerland with the idea of bringing a breath of fresh air into the consumer electronics market, aimed at people who want to be in charge of the technology they buy. In 2024, Punkt took modern tech intentionality to a new level with the MC02, a smartphone ecosystem with no reliance on Google, Apple, or any other corporation, independent, open, transparent, and providing freedom of choice with a focus on privacy and a more conscientious mobile experience. And Max, thanks for being my guest yet again. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's fun as always.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed yourself. We'll have you on again at some point in the future. And folks, we will have another show next week. So please stay tuned for that. Until then, cheers, everybody.